And I just think it's unfortunate that GM has really stubbed their toe here with this, this fuel management technology or cylinder deactivation technology. This truck right here is getting about 19 liters per 100 kilometers, which is like 12 miles per gallon. Well, huge shocker. We have another black GMC on the channel, but this time we have the 6.2 liter V8 engine in here. Pretty excited to talk about that and dive deeper into it. But yeah, wow. This is actually my Mako tool guy's truck. He's been nice enough to lend it to me for the afternoon. This is a 2019 GMC Sierra AT4. And he's actually put some really nice touches onto this truck. He's got the blacked out GMC badge there. It actually lights up as well. He's got the blacked out AT4 badges down here, all tinted out. It's a really, really nice looking truck, I have to say. So for starters, this is a 6.2 liter naturally aspirated pushrod V8, and it is putting out 420 horsepower as well as 460 pound-feet of torque. It is a part of the Ecotec 3 or the 5th gen small block engine family, which also encompasses the 5.3 liter V8 as well as the 4.3 liter V6. Now, despite this being a pushrod V8, there is some interesting technology in here, stuff like direct injection, dynamic fuel management, variable valve timing, start-stop technology, and we will dive into some greater depth into those things later in the video. With this 6.2, you get an aluminum block, aluminum cylinder heads, you get a forged crankshaft, forged connecting rods, as well as aluminum alloy pistons, which give this thing a compression ratio of 11.5 to 1, which is pretty high. Again, we will talk later in the video about why that is quite important to remember. So the first thing that I really like about this engine, and I think mostly everyone can agree on this, is the power output. So this is the highest V8 power output in the 1500 truck segment. Motor Trend took this thing to the track to really show us how powerful this engine is, and it ran a 0 to 60 time in 5.5 seconds, which is pretty darn quick for a 5,000 pound 4x4 truck. It also ran the quarter mile, 14 seconds flat at 100 miles an hour. So this 6.2 liter V8 is putting out some really, really impressive power. Now, yes, speed is probably not going to excite the average pickup truck driver that much when it comes to buying a truck. However, with that speed and power comes towing ability. Now, this truck right here in a crew cab 4x4 configuration can tow up to 13,300 pounds, which to me is pretty impressive for, again, a 4x4 crew cab configuration in a 1500. Now, seeing that the 3 liter Duramax diesel can also tow, I believe, 13,000 pounds in a crew cab 4x4 configuration leads me to believe that the max towing ability of this engine is not limited to the engine itself, rather the truck. So in my opinion, I feel like this 6.2 liter engine could probably tow a lot more weight if it had the right truck behind it. Now, what comes with that, and I think what's a little understated with that, especially when it just comes to towing numbers on paper, is the ease of towing. And I think this 6.2 is going to be a much easier towing engine. It's going to make the towing experience for you guys a much easier, simpler process. So having the 6.2 liter engine over the 5.3 liter or the 3 liter Duramax is just going to really help you guys in terms of that towing experience as a whole. So that is another nice advantage of this engine. So this thing is a nice, powerful power plant, and I'm actually really excited to get this thing on the road, feel the power in the driver's seat. We're going to do that next week. But in terms of mechanical advantages with this engine, well, it's a tried and true pushrod V8. GM has made many pushrod V8s through its lifetime. They seem to do a pretty good job of it. You got a forged crankshaft, forged connecting rod, so you're gonna get good bottom end strength out of this engine, which is always good to see. In fact, the 5.3 is extremely similar to this engine. The main difference is the bore diameter. So the stroke of the 5.3 and the 6.2 are actually the same. The only difference is the bore is larger in the 6.2, and that's what gives it that larger displacement and more power. So those are some things that I really like about the 6.2. At the end of the day, this thing is just a very powerful, fun, fast engine. And I think anyone who owns this engine is just gonna have a great time driving your truck. No engine is perfect, and this thing is no exception. And before we get into the negative side of this engine, just wanna remind everyone, these are just my opinions, what I kind of see with this engine. And if you guys have anything to add, drop a comment down below. I like hearing what you guys have to say. I like reading your comments, and usually there's some pretty good information down there. But anyways, let's see what's going on in terms of issues and things I don't like about this engine. Now, the first thing that kind of bugs me about this 6.2 is the fact that you should probably be running 93 octane premium fuel in this truck. Now, I know everyone kind of has their own opinions online about this, and GM does not actually fully require it. Rather, they highly recommend that you run 93 octane premium fuel. And it's not like if you put 87 regular fuel in here, you're gonna get check engine lights or misfires. The engine will run, and it'll probably run just fine. But the reason why I think you should be running 93 octane has to do with the high compression ratio in this engine. So this engine has a compression ratio of 11.5 to 1, which is actually quite high for a naturally aspirated engine. And unlike what some people believe that higher octane fuels actually have more power in them, it's not necessarily true. Higher octane fuels, for the most part, again, I'm no chemist, but basically what they allow is the fuel to combust at a higher pressure. So what happens when you run 87 octane in a higher compression engine is that the fuel will actually ignite from the pressure alone and not the spark. And so what that does is cause detonation in the cylinder, because some of the fuel is combusting from the pressure alone and some of the fuel is combusting with the spark. And as those two combustion zones combine, you get detonation in the cylinder, and that kind of sounds like a knocking, and it actually can wreak a lot of havoc on an engine. Now, on the flip side, with something like 93 octane fuel, it can withstand the higher compression ratios or the higher cylinder pressures and not auto-ignite from the pressure alone. It will only ignite from the spark, therefore resulting in a controlled burn or a controlled expansion, resulting in a healthy combustion stroke. Now, these are smart, modern engines. If you put 87 octane fuel in here, it'll notice pretty quickly that there's detonation happening in the cylinder. And what it'll do is it'll actually change up the timing a little bit. So the spark goes off at a slightly different time. And so basically what happens is that will eliminate most of the detonation, but you will lose performance, and most importantly, you'll lose fuel efficiency when you run those lower octane fuels. If you're hoping to keep this engine for long term, I would highly recommend running 93 octane. Yes, this engine will adjust with 87 octane fuel, but it will not eliminate all of the detonation. And if you guys are towing or putting any power down to the road, there's more likely chance of detonation with that lower octane fuel. So realistically, this engine is designed to be run with 93 octane fuel for its best performance and longevity. That's why I would highly recommend that anyone looking to keep their engine healthy run 93 octane. And to me, that is a very tough pill to swallow when you're buying a pickup truck. The second thing that really concerns me is the dynamic fuel management, or GM's cylinder deactivation in this engine. It's been talked about a ton online, and rightfully so, because I think it is a major issue with these engines. Now, both the 5.3 as well as the 6.2 have dynamic fuel management, also known as DFM for short. And I guess the reason for GM implementing this is, well, quote, GM wanted a more fuel-efficient, environmentally friendly big V8 compared to previous Vortec versions. And unfortunately, those two things rarely combine for reliability. So starting in 2019, GM moved to this DFM system. Before that, they had what was called active fuel management, or AFM, and that was a simpler version of their cylinder deactivation. Basically, you could either run in a V8 mode or only have 4 cylinders firing, and so that was what's called AFM. Now, DFM has the ability to shut down any cylinder at any time. In fact, I believe there's like 17 different firing patterns that can happen on this engine, as well as allowing only 2 cylinders to be firing at a time. So essentially what GM is trying to do is save even more fuel by having an even more complex cylinder deactivation system on these engines. Now, probably to no one's surprise, GM is having massive lifter and valve train failures starting in 2019 with this DFM system in there. And that is because, well, the DFM, or Dynamic Fuel Management System, utilizes the lifters primarily to either shut down or activate cylinders. And so unfortunately, these engines are just having massive lifter failures with extremely low mileage trucks, which is just unfortunate to see. So in 2021, GM released an official technical service bulletin, basically mentioning that if a truck was having a valve train issue or lifter issues, they put new updated lifters in them. And going forward, all the newer trucks would have the newer updated lifter in them. However, we're still seeing lifter failure, valve train failure in the newer trucks, still at low mileage, so I don't know what good that really did. And I just think it's unfortunate that GM has really stubbed their toe here with this, this fuel management technology or cylinder deactivation technology. This truck right here is getting about 19 liters per 100 kilometers, which is like 12 miles per gallon. Really not great fuel economy. So, you know, to me, it's kind of like, what is the point of putting all this complex tech that's making the engine less reliable to still have these trucks really not be that efficient? So, you know, yeah, it's unfortunate to see. GM's whole cylinder deactivation stuff just kind of puts a sour taste in my mouth, because for years, GM was known for making these good quality, strong, reliable V8s. And I just don't understand why they've kind of gone down this road to really not save that much fuel at the end of the day. And now my final point about this is the 6.6 liter gas V8 engine in the HD trucks, 2500, 3500s. They don't have any cylinder deactivation technology in them. And shockingly, we don't hear about really any valve train lifter failures in them. So I think it's pretty cut and paste what is causing these massive lifter failures in these engines. It's that cylinder deactivation technology that really doesn't save you much fuel anyway. So that is by far the #1 issue with these engines, as well as the 5.3s. So keep that in mind if you're looking to buy one. Another concern I have with this engine is the direct fuel injection. Direct fuel injection, it's pretty self-explanatory. The injector, the fuel injector, is directly in the combustion chamber. And it gives you a number of advantages, like throttle response, fuel economy, power, as well as being able to have a higher combustion chamber ratio. So all good things, but there are some side effects with direct injection, which this engine seems to suffer from. So the #1 downside by far with direct injection and what affects these engines is the carboning up of the intake and the intake valves. So on a normal port injection fuel system, something that's like in my 6.4 HEMI or your 5.7 HEMI, fuel is constantly spraying down the intake as well as the intake valve, and that clears any carbon that could get stuck on the intake and the intake valve. Now, with direct injection, the injector, like we mentioned, is directly in the combustion chamber. So the intake valve does not get sprayed with fuel. Therefore, there's the chance and the possibility of carbon buildup on the intake and the intake valve. Basically, it's going to limit the airflow that can get into the cylinder and eventually get to a point where it can even start to cause misfires, loss of power, rough idling. And there's really no way to kind of clean that off other than physically getting in there and physically cleaning up the carbon. Now, in GM's defense, this is common on any direct injection system. It's not just GM, but it is something to be aware of. Now, a couple manufacturers have circumnavigated this side effect of direct injection. Ford, I'm sure you guys have heard of them. In 2017, they implemented what's called dual injection fuel system on their 5-liter V8s in their pickup trucks, basically meaning it has a port injection system as well as a direct injection system all in one. So you get the benefits of direct injection. However, you also have port injection spraying down the intake so you don't get carbon buildup. Toyota is another manufacturer that's now kind of implementing a system very similar to that. To me, we're coming up on the 2024 models here this fall, and you know, Ford implemented that dual injection system to circumnavigate the side effects and the issues of direct injection 7 years ago. So, you know, it's not like these trucks are getting any cheaper. And so you know, I thought for years GM would implement what Ford did, but they just haven't. And it's not like carbon buildup is an undocumented side effect of direct injection. It's very well documented. It just would be nice to see GM address that very well-known issue and do something like what Ford did, addressed it, get it out of the way, and now it's just behind them and they can have their direct injection and not have to worry about carbon buildup. So that would be nice to see from GM. Now, the fourth thing that kind of caught my eye that I didn't necessarily like about this engine is the fact that it's going to come with a variable displacement oil pump. I would have liked to see a fixed displacement oil pump, but again, to kind of defend GM here, it seems like the whole industry is going towards variable displacement oil pumps. And I think the number one reason why is because it allows you to extend your oil life intervals much longer than a fixed displacement oil pump. And I think that is highly advantageous to fleet owners, and fleet owners buy a lot of trucks, and to fleets, they heavily prioritize maintenance costs. So if they can lower maintenance costs, they're more likely to buy your brand of truck. Now, the second reason why I could think manufacturers are going this route is because it is going to slightly increase fuel economy, which as we saw earlier in the video, GM would do anything to increase the fuel economy of these engines. So that would also make sense. The reason why I don't like variable displacement oil pumps is because at idle, I just think they don't put enough pressure up into the engine. I know when I reviewed the 7.3 liter Godzilla engine from Ford, they were saying that the idle oil pressure from its variable displacement pump was like 6 or 7 psi of pressure, which to me is just not enough. And well, that engine's having some valve train issues. And well, what is the last thing to get oil? It's your valve train. So, you know, when there's a lot of extended idling on an engine and it has not very much oil pressure at idling, to me, it's a little bit of a recipe of things that could go wrong. Now, luckily, there has been no reported issues with this variable displacement oil pump from GM. But again, it's just something that caught my eye. I just thought I'd share that with you guys. Well, guys, to conclude, those are some things that I like about this engine. First and foremost is the power, the torque, the horsepower. You put your foot down, it's gonna make you smile. Smiles per mile, as they say, and that is probably going to be very accurate with this truck. Another thing that I really like is the towing ability and the ease of towing. You know, if you're gonna tow like an 8,000, 10,000 pound trailer, this thing will do it without much issue, and it's just gonna make your life so much easier, which I like that about this as well. It's a good pushrod V8. It's gonna have a solid bottom end on it like most GM V8s do. However, it is not flawless, and like we discussed, there are some pretty decent issues or concerns I would have if I was going to be buying this engine. To be completely honest with you guys, I think there are more reliable options in the 1500 segment than the 6.2 as well as the 5.3 because, well, they're just basically almost the same engine. I love GM. I like GM. I used to own GM trucks. I think they used to make really quality V8 engines that people could rely on. But unfortunately, the 2019 plus V8s in their trucks, specifically in the 1500 segment, have really suffered some reliability issues, and I don't think I'm wrong saying that. You guys can disagree with me if you want, but I think in general, you know, there are some more reliable engine options out there than this. And yeah, that is my conclusion. Anyways, guys, I hope you liked the video. If you did, don't forget to leave that thumbs up. And if you like cool stuff like this, don't forget to subscribe. Anyways, enough of me, guys. See you in the next freaking video.